Hey there, welcome back to another review. This time of the 1988 anime Grave of the Fireflies. Yeah, this is going to be a heavy video, folks. I have to thank Jonathan for sending me this DVD, and he asked for my opinion on the film, so that's why we have this review. So, big shout out goes out to Jonathan, longtime subscriber and good friend of mine. And let's get started. Let's get right into the review. I know this film is widely regarded by a multitude of critics and audiences to be one of the most amazing, powerful, emotionally gripping anime that have ever been put on the screen. I know a majority of people say that this is a masterpiece. Well, I'm not those people, okay? And I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't like this movie. I wasn't a big fan of this film. I didn't hate it. I didn't think it was completely worthless. I want to get that out here right now. There were a lot of elements to it that I did like, that I did appreciate. And I felt that really made the film worth at least one watch. But overall, I wasn't a fan. Did I show some emotion? Yeah. But not as much as other people did. I don't think that makes me some soulless robot or a emotionless husk or somebody who can't feel empathy. I think that kind of commentary is just bullshit, if you ask me, because everyone experiences emotions differently. Okay, nobody experiences emotions the same way. What makes you emotional might not make might not make everybody else emotional, and that's not something to tear anybody down about. I just think that's just a really sick and unnecessary aspect of society. Is if, oh, you didn't show emotion, you didn't cry like a baby at the end of this movie, fuck you, you're a horrible person. Like, really, like that makes you better. That makes you better. You're gonna call out people who didn't show the same emotions as you. That's just that's unnecessary. People feel emotions differently, and that doesn't mean that they lack empathy or they're horrible people. Okay? All right. Now, that being said, there are some very powerful imagery in this film. There's some really effective moments where it does effectively pull at my heartstrings, and it does bring out some emotion. But they seem to be few and far between for me personally. The biggest emotion other than sheer boredom that I felt while watching this movie was anger and frustration at the actions of Seta. His incredibly idiotic actions, which cost the life of his sister and his own. That is the biggest emotion I felt while watching the movie. And I don't know if that was the intent. Maybe it was. I've heard people say it was trying to be like a social commentary, saying talking about how stubborn the Japanese were around this time period. But I didn't quite get it like that. On first glance, all I saw was a kid making really poor decisions, and that was really frustrating. And I get it. He's a kid. Kids are naive. But the decisions he makes in this are not just naivety. They are idiocy. And are just him being a straight up ass. Being an idiot. And if this was a movie that featured adults in this particular situation, I don't feel they would get as much, he would get as much of a pass for his decision making. And I don't agree with that mindset anyway. Oh, a kid makes a stupid, dumb decision that costs the life of himself and his sister. He's just a kid. He doesn't know any better. An adult does the same thing. He's an idiot. What the hell? That guy's a dumbass. Fuck that guy. He's a piece of shit. But it's a kid? Oh no. To me, if you make dumbass decisions, they're still dumbass decisions with heavy consequences, no matter what age you are. But that's just me personally. Now, the film is directed by Isao Takahata, and it's written by Isao Takahata. It's based on a short story, Grave of the Fireflies, by Akiyuki Nosaka. And this is a short story that was inspired by real-life events in the author's life. He actually did make poor decisions that ended up killing his sister. But unlike this story that he wrote, and unlike this anime, this film, he survived. He was forced to live with that guilt. He was forced to live with regret. And taking away that aspect of him having to live with his actions really hurts the impact of this overall story, if you ask me. It seems like a cop-out. Oh, he died pretty soon after his sister died, so he gets to be with his sister. And showing them in this sort of ghost realm where they can have hard fruit candies whenever they want, they can phase in and out of everywhere, they can go anywhere they want, no consequences, they don't have to worry about being bombed, they could sit there and watch the city line. That really does not help, because it makes their situation in the afterlife look so much better than their situation was when they were alive. But that's just my personal perspective on that. But anyway, the film also stars the voice acting of Tatsumo Tatsumi, Ayano Shirarashi, Yoshiko Shinohara, and Akemi Yamaguchi as the Japanese voice actors. And there's two different English dubs. There's one by Sky Pilot Entertainment and CPM that has J. Robert Spencer, who voices Seita, Rhoda Crusotti, who does Setsuko, Veronica Taylor voices Seita and Setsuko's mother, the Ants voiced by Amy Jones, and in the Toho Seraphim Sentai English voice dub, you have Adam Gibbs, who voices Seita. Setsuko is voiced by Emily Neves. Seita and Setsuko's mother is voiced by Shelley Kayleen Black. Seita and Setsuko's aunt is voiced by Marcy Banner. Now, I'm going to say this about the voice acting. With the dubs that I did listen to, I would say the Japanese dub is the best. And when it comes to Seita, he's pretty consistent with the voice dub throughout all the different versions. And so are a lot of the other cast members. But Setsuko, in particular, one of the English dubs, I can't remember exactly which one it was really awful. It was annoying. It was a middle-aged woman trying to act like she's a kid. That's always annoying. That's always not effective. That hurt the film for me, watching that dub, because that dub was terrible. It really was. It was unquestionably terrible. The best that dub got was when Setsuko was dying of starvation. But when Setsuko was trying to be cute and act like a little girl, it wasn't effective because it didn't sound real. It sounded like a parody. It sounded like an adult acting like they're a 5-year-old. It was not effective. It was laughable and annoying. But the character of Setsuko, excuse me, by default had some crippling flaws, because his character seemed like it jumped right off a box of Japanese candy. Like it jumped out of a completely different fantasy realm other than reality, because the character had these rosy cheeks. It was just the cute as a button, and was just nothing but a construct for cute and childish innocence. And that's probably the point. But it just makes for a rather I don't know if irritating is the right word, but tiresome experience to just deal with this kid who's just insufferably cute, insufferably sweet. I mean, to the point where it makes you sick. I felt like my teeth were aching watching this character and watching what she was doing and so on and so forth. And it also feels manipulative, and blatantly so. Not clandestinely manipulative, not trying to hide it, not trying to be clever in any way. Manipulative by itself is not a problem because manipulating people's emotions is a part of storytelling and a part of filmmaking, but making it blatantly obvious, that's an issue because now I know who's the puppet master, and that's an issue. I should not know who the puppet master is while I'm watching the film. And I knew exactly who the puppet master was. It was Asao Takahata, who was trying to make me feel emotional, some kind of emotional connection to Setsuko and her brother because they're kids and they're doing kid things. And to me, it just felt, it felt not necessarily forced, but it just wasn't very effective. And it's not because I'm a cold, heartless bastard. It's just because it's all you have. It's that there's no character development with these characters. It's just these moments that they have, these things that they do. They do things that kids do, and I guess I'm supposed to connect with it emotionally because they're kids. That's all it seemed like to me. There was no character development before their town got bombed, before their mother died. I didn't even really get to know that much of what their relationship was with their mother, other than their mother was essentially perfect. That's it. Their mother was perfect, loved them, and then she died. That's all I really know about the relationship with their mother. What about with the father? All I know is that he's a soldier and that Seita admires him. But that's all I get. There wasn't a lot of character moments, so it's hard for me to resonate. They're hard for me to really connect with these characters or care about what happens to them if I don't know that much about them. Why should I care? The film just assumes that I should care because they're kids, and I don't like that. I really don't. It's not a very effective way to tell a story. It's not a very effective way to write characters. If this is how the short story was, that's an issue. This should have just adapted the short story and took different liberties, like it already does. It takes liberties from the story, so why couldn't it just take more liberties and make it a stronger film with stronger characters and more character development? And not do a completely dumb idea and give away what happens to these characters in the beginning of the film. Spoilers, folks, in the beginning of the movie, the kid, Seita is talking to essentially himself, saying this is how I die. This is when I died. So you already know that the kids are gonna die from the beginning of the movie. There goes the suspense. There goes any bit of not necessarily intrigue, but it's a suspense. You're not waiting. Now you're not wondering if they're gonna die. You already know they're gonna die, and now you're just waiting for them to die. And I don't really think that's a very engaging story to tell. Even in a short story or memoir format. To me, it seemed like there's a lot of navel gazing in this. And what I mean by that is navel gazing is a term that I learned while I was taking a creative nonfiction writing class at Washington State University, the Vancouver, Washington campus. And navel gazing is something that an author should not be doing in creative nonfiction. They should not be looking down at themselves and focusing on themselves while they're writing their piece. And that's what it seems like with this story. It's a lot of navel gazing. It's a lot of Seita just literally looking at himself die and then looking back at what he did with his sister and the fun that they had, and then what he did that led to her death and his own. It's just a whole lot of navel gazing, and the opening of the film, which just throws you right into the thick of things without any context. Just boom, there's air raids and their town's getting bombed, and there's not much really there to hinge the audience to, except kids are in danger now. That's it. The mother dies. He goes to live with his aunt. She's written as a character that is honestly nowhere near as bad as Seda thinks she is. She's pretty balanced. She's pretty smart. She just wants him to stop being lazy and loafing around the house and eating all her food. It's not really it's not like she's asking him to do that much. She's actually has her head on straight. But she's considered to be a bad guy or a villain or painted as some evil woman, which is a total mistake. And in the actual source material, the short story, I found out with some research, the aunt was unabashedly a bad person. Like, the aunt stole everything that he had. He would bring things to her and she would take advantage of him and what he would bring to the house. So I'm wondering why they painted the aunt in a way that was fairly sympathetic and pretty balanced, if this is a character supposed to be in a way sort of an antagonist. If you're already taking creative liberties with the story, why not go all the way and make the aunt a total bitch? She's a total unlikable bitch. There's nothing likable about her. She steals not only the food that Seta brings into the home, but treats them badly, doesn't show them any respect, and even like steals Seta's money. And she kicks them out. And now they're forced to live on their own. Now that to me is a pretty effective way to enhance a story. You could take the story, you're loosely adapting it anyway, why not go the extra mile and improve weak elements like that? But no, it doesn't. It just leaves the aunt as this character that isn't nearly as awful as Seda thinks she is. And that's not even actually the reality of the situation, of the real life events that the short story, that this anime is based on. And that's just one instance of when Seda could have found a way out of starvation and death. There's two others. He had $3,000 in yen that he could have accessed, but he doesn't do that until his sister's really sick. Why did he wait so long? And then the other one is he could have gotten a job. I mean, because the other one is with the aunt. He could have gotten back and went back and lived with the aunt. So there's actually, you know, I didn't mention the aunt one because I thought I finished my discussion of it, but now that I think about it, I didn't mention that aspect. He could have just swallowed his pride, lived with his aunt, took his sister over there when she was sick. But no, doesn't do that because he's egotistical and he's selfish. That's what I'm talking about when it's idiocy. Naive, not going back and living with the aunt, okay, I get that. But having $3,000 in yen that you can access and not doing that until your sister is sick and until you are starving, that's stupid. Okay, that's not naivete. That's not a kid being a kid. That's somebody being stupid. Okay, and if it was an adult doing that, nobody would be given a pass. Everyone would be like, well, that's stupid. What a way to be a dumbass. Exactly. What a way to be a dumbass. Some more lighting because the sun apparently went down or went behind the clouds or something. But yeah, I mean, his decision making is so frustrating in this. And it takes me out of the film. It really does. I'm supposed to be sympathetic for Seta by default because he's a kid. The kid is a dipshit. He made some stupid fucking decisions. He's selfish and he's being an ass. I'm sorry. I look at people making dumb decisions equally, whether it's a kid or an adult. Are they being an ass? Yes. They don't get a pass for it. I'm sorry. He doesn't deserve a pass. No kid deserves a pass. Nobody deserves a pass for decisions like this that are terrible. They're just horrible, terrible decisions. I mean, even the guy who wrote the story could probably tell you that he doesn't deserve a pass for what he did, for the decisions that he made. The writing by Isao Takahata is a serious problem with this film. It's the biggest issue for me, other than the characters, because the characters just aren't that likable. I didn't find them to be as likable as other people did. They weren't that charismatic. They weren't that interesting. They really didn't resonate with me. And that's the problem the film has. It hinges so much upon these kids and you emotionally connecting to them. And if the film fails to do that and fails to hook you in, it is a really hard film to sit through. Not because of the subject matter, but because of how slowly paced it is. It relies too heavily upon that emotional connection. And if it's effective and it grabs you in, it works. And it works really well. And for the people that it works for, I'm glad. That's awesome. I'm glad it works for you. That means that this is still an interesting place to be in, because we have people with different opinions and who feel differently about things and experience things differently. But for me, it didn't hook me in from the start. So it was really boring. And the story wasn't that well thought out or fleshed out. And it wasn't really that interesting or engaging or intriguing. The idea of kids trying to survive on their own in war-torn Japan in World War II, I can be all for that. That's showing a dynamic and a particular story or side of the story, or side of war that we don't see that often. But in this film, it's not as simple as that. It's the kid has options to survive and to get out of the situation. It wasn't forced to do this. He chose to do this. There's no force to live on their own in this. He chose to do that. And I feel for Setsuko, because when she dies, she didn't have a choice. And she was essentially abandoned and left for dead by her brother, because her brother chose his own ego and his own selfishness above her own life. And that's tragic, and that's sad. And I did get emotional, and I did feel for Setsuko. I felt for the little sister, because she had no choice in this matter. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't fend for herself. She couldn't make the kind of decisions that her brother could and did. So I'm not totally heartless, okay? The aria at the end was pretty effective. The use of music I liked. But it's not as effective as it could be when you realize the motivations behind it. The director, Isao Takahata, clearly made this film and turned it into a message to Japanese teenagers in the 80s. To tell them, respect your elders, stop being a bunch of dicks. That's basically what he was saying. It's not exactly, I'm not quoting him, but he was saying, he did say in other interviews that it was his goal to make the film for teenagers. To really show them the trauma that their elders went through. And to show them that, hey, show some respect. But it comes across so transparent, because even in the aria, there's a scene where there's a bunch of teenage girls who randomly show up out of nowhere. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their characters are. They just randomly show up, giggling and happy, back to their town, and it's in one piece, and they go up to their house, and they're all happy that their record player is still going, and then while that's happening, Seita is cremating his dead sister. Pretty tone deaf. When you look into it, you're like, wow, like that's pretty cheap. that's pretty cheap. And it honestly, I don't really care for it. I don't care for that type of storytelling. The type of like, see, look at how ungrateful you are, you little bastards. I don't appreciate that, especially when it's so blatantly obvious. Um, and even the ending of the film is like that. It's like Seta is looking at you and judging you. Uh, it like literally staring right at you and trying to stare through your soul. See? It's just like, come on. Like, that's just, it's laying it on way too thick. So, that's it's just the director and the writer, who's also the writer's approach to adapting this story that really doesn't sit well with me, and is what hurts the film the most for me. One of the biggest things for me out of any film is likable, engaging, relatable characters and a strong story. And I didn't feel that this film had those two very important elements. Characters weren't that likable or that interesting or that engaging, and the story was pretty dull. There isn't really, you can sum up the story in a few sentences. It doesn't have a lot of twists or turns, doesn't have any at all. It's for the most part, a good chunk of it is just kids being kids, and that's it. And then the last chunk of it is not necessarily showing the horrors of war, but the horrors of really bad decisions. And that's sad, but that's sad and tragic, but in a different way altogether. If you ask me, the film would have been heavily improved upon if it adapted that element from the actual source material, where the aunt is really bad. There's no ambiguity. She really is a bad seed. She really is not a good person. Have her steal the money, so then the 3,000 yen is not there, not a part of the equation. She kicks them out so they can't go back, and now they are forced. Seita and his sister Setsugo are forced to survive and fend for themselves in this harsh environment, and have Seita either try to get a job and fail, or get a job and then get hurt on the job and not be able to sustain it, and then they slowly starve to death. They starve to death. I mean, just thinking about that is getting me choked up. I mean, it is, because that is really sad. And that represents the individuals from that era who had that as their reality. That actually did happen. There were a lot of individuals in war-torn Japan in World War II who did not have ways out. They did not have 3,000 yen in the bank. They did not have a place to go back to. They just had themselves. They just had to rely upon themselves to survive. And there were a lot of kids, young adults, that had to do that. And seeing that particular individual voice and life represented, I feel that would have been so much more effective. But that's just me personally. The way it is, it's just not as emotionally powerful or resonating as I personally felt it could have been. It frustrates you with the decisions that Seita makes. It's not just, oh, he's a kid, he doesn't know better. When you have that amount of money in the bank, when you've held a job before, he's held a job before, he knows what responsibility is. I just don't. It's hard. It's very difficult for me to feel the utmost sympathy for anyone in that who makes those kind of decisions. And then And then you have, there's a very slow pace. There's no suspense because you already know what's going to happen. You already know they're going to die. And even elements like the Fireflies, they don't do as much with them as they could. There's a nice quote. Why do Fireflies have to die so young? But it's just a surface level thing. They could have incorporated the Fireflies some more into the narrative, or made it a plot device, or done some more metaphors with it, but they didn't really do that much. So I feel that that was a little bit of a letdown as well. Overall, the entire film was a letdown to me. I was very disappointed by this movie, because I know this is a movie that is highly acclaimed and considered to be one of the greatest animes ever, and I just wasn't as impressed by it as other people were. But that's just me personally. Not taking that anything away from anyone else that saw this and was moved or was blown away by it. I think that's great. I just felt it lacked in the storytelling department and the character department. And while there were some effective imagery, like the mother in bloody bandages, and I mean, that's an image that nobody ever wants to see. They don't want to see their loved ones like that. And I felt the film showed that in a very unflinching and effective manner. The death of Setsuko by starvation, the cremation scene, the aria, the bombing sequence was well shot and well put together. Animation in it was admirable. The aesthetics were really well done. I didn't mind the music. I didn't mind the score. From a production aspect, the film is pretty fantastic. I don't really see a lot of problems with it when it comes to that. Animation was fluid. It had the right amount of grit and darkness to it for the source material and the subject matter. Although, to be honest, I think this would have been more effective as a live action film, because something about the animation just doesn't click with me with this type of storytelling. This type of storytelling would work better for me as a short story or as a live action movie or a short film, because when you have animation, there's already this certain fantastical element to it, this larger than life element to it. And when you try to have like really gritty animation, and you have this little girl who walked off the side of a Japanese box of candy, that just doesn't really mesh very well. So if it was more of a straightforward, realistic live-action film, it might be more effective. And I know there's some live-action adaptations, and I'm curious about giving them a look sometime. But not right now. This film is depressing and sad enough. I don't really have any desire to watch another version of it, especially not anytime soon. And that's another thing. If it made you sad, that doesn't automatically make the film great. There are plenty of films that make you sad, that can make you cry. But that doesn't mean that because it did that, it's a great movie. There's more to filmmaking, there's more to storytelling than just did it make you sad or not. At least for me personally. It's an effective storytelling technique, and if the film does grab you like that, then it succeeded. And I could see why so many people, if they were so moved by this, that they'd be like, it's such a great film, because it resonated with them emotionally. And that's what you want out of a film. That's what you want out of a story, is you want to connect with it. I just didn't feel the same connection with the film. But that's just me personally. I don't know what to say about the movie, except that, once again, did not hate the movie. Don't look at this as a total rant. Don't look at this as me saying, this movie sucks. I didn't like the film. I didn't quite care for it, but I don't think it's a sucky film or it's a piece of shit. It's not a time waster for me. It doesn't reach that average status for me, because I really don't have any desire to watch this again. But like I said, from the other production elements and aspects of it, the animation, the aesthetics, some of the voice acting, the direction, even though I don't really like the director injecting his personal views on teenagers into the film, but the direction still was fine, and as was the editing and cinematography and the music. And it had some genuinely effective visuals. But story just wasn't interesting enough, wasn't detailed enough, wasn't engaging enough. The characters weren't interesting or likable enough, lacked character development, and it just didn't click. It just didn't connect with me like it did other people. And I know I sound like a broken record, but sometimes I just feel like I have to do that because whenever I review films like this, it's controversial and you're sharing an opinion that's so far from the norm that you just want to double check and you want to be as detailed as possible when it comes to your viewpoint, your view on it. And even then, that's not enough. Because how dare you desecrate such a classic film? I'm not desecrating the movie. I see potential here. I felt it was wasted. There are moments when this movie is as bright. It burns as bright as fireflies in the night. But it just isn't consistent enough with those particular moments for me. But anyway, yeah, I got nothing else to say. I've already talked your ear off enough. I don't know what else to say except if I were to rate it out of 5 stars. It's kind of difficult, but I'd give it 2.5 out of 5. There's enough elements that I liked that I felt that definitely deserve credit, but there's just not. It's just imbalanced with the really critical things that I look for out of a film: storytelling and characters. That's just me. This is my opinion. Feel free to agree to disagree. And thanks for watching. And as always, I will see you later. See you.